an important part of what we're doing today and tomorrow is what's coming up right now, which is the public comment period.
Hello, I'm Will Nuckols, and while a few of you may know me and expect me to usually give comments on things like critters and marsh grasses and those sorts of things, I think there's a number of people that will talk eloquently about that, and you have some of that expertise on your own panel. I'm going to talk a little bit about marine salvage and emergency response capabilities in government. It's important to remember that this whole disaster started with the loss of a drilling platform at sea. It really started as a salvage sort of operation that wasn't able to be completed before the disaster got out of control and then had the cascading effects that we're living with now. So if you think of the situation in terms of what any vessel owner experiences at sea, if you're a mile off the beach and you run out of gas, you call towboats US because it's not that big of an incident. But if you're 20 miles at sea and you're in a hurricane, you call the government. You call the people with the robust capabilities because that's the folks that are really the course of last resort that's really going to come bail you out. Well, if you think of that same mentality in terms of how we can respond to disasters like happened at the Deepwater Horizon, the capacity of government is really quite limited. It's both limited at the surface as well as extremely limited if we're talking about at depth. There's been a lot of talk about how to deal with it at several miles beneath the sea, but it's important to even look at what we can do on the surface. The Coast Guard's capabilities largely relate to loss of life prevention and oil spill response in terms of actual chemical cleanup, but they don't have the robust salvage capabilities. What little bit we have exists in the Navy. That is largely split between a couple of ships that are split between the Pacific and the Atlantic coast. The odds of them being in the region that a disaster happens at any particular time are pretty darn limited. These vessels tend to move pretty slowly. Their ability to respond is pretty slow. And we've actually gone backwards in terms of underwater capabilities versus where we were even 30 years ago. In the 70s, we had the ability to put manned in the sea up to 1,000 feet, hundreds of feet down, and able to go do work. We've largely lost most of that capability. We're now working on rebuilding that capacity. The saturation diving capability of the military is on its way back, but we're not there yet. It's important to realize sort of where we are in that timeline and just trying to get back to where we once were. But now that we're going offshore and going deeper, probably getting to where we were in 1975 is not our ultimate goal. We really ought to look farther along. And if you want to go away to a place to start about where you're going to have this dialogue in a more robust sense, I'd like to point you to the Navy's expert on this, the supervisor of salvage. It's Captain Patrick Keenan. He's in D.C. for when you're having your meetings back there. I hope you'll invite him to come meet with you and talk with his staff and have an honest discussion about what our existing capabilities are to respond to these sorts of disasters, and then talk with them along with the other parts of government that deal with deep sea vehicles to talk about where we might go. And then ultimately, if you come up with a recommendation, try not to park this in one part of government, because the few capabilities that we do have, due to the sort of the statutory restraints on each department and what they're allowed to work on, we tend to park these in one area and then not allow other parts of government to use them. For instance, there's two 2,000-foot capable hard suits that the Navy has, but they're parked in one part of the Navy that the other parts of the Navy don't have access to because they're really meant for submarine rescue capabilities. So let's not repeat some of those mistakes. Let's try and have these assets broadly available to all parts of the government so that we can use them not just in times of disasters, but so they can serve the American people on a daily basis. Thanks.
Thank you for your comment.